The experts have a number for you, and it is designed to make your stomach drop. $1.46 million. That is what Americans now say you need to retire. It is plastered across every headline, every ad, every anxious dinner conversation. And every time it appears, another wave of people quietly loses hope entirely. But that number was never carefully calculated for you or for your actual life. And for most people, that number lands like a door slamming shut on their future. Meet Bianca. She saw that number and quietly decided retirement was hopeless. She was ready to work 8 extra years, chasing a target she would probably never hit. 8 years is not a small sacrifice. It is a huge slice of a person's healthy life. And she was about to surrender them all to a number she never once questioned. But here is what the experts conveniently leave out of that terrifying headline. For most ordinary people, the real number is roughly half of what they are told. Half. Not through gimmicks or sacrifice, but through math the headlines quietly ignore. Because that giant number assumes your savings must fund your entire retirement alone. It quietly ignores the income you will already receive and the costs that vanish. We will not use gimmicks or false hope. We will only use honest, verifiable math. So today, we take that intimidating expert number and cut it down to your real size. To be clear, this is not about pretending you need less than you really do. It is about counting the income and savings the headline conveniently forgot. Real math, done honestly, is far kinder to you than a frightening headline ever is. For millions of ordinary savers, the real target is roughly half the scary one. Because a comfortable retirement is far closer than the headlines ever want you to believe. Picture Bianca staring at that headline number late at night, doing the cruel math. At her savings pace, that giant target looked like it was decades out of reach. She almost accepted a simple, crushing conclusion. People like her cannot retire. What she did not yet realize is that the number itself was quietly wrong for her. First, understand where that scary 1.46 million number even comes from. It is not a lie exactly. It is a generic average built on a few big assumptions. The first assumption is that you will spend heavily, right up to 80% of your pay. The second is that your savings alone must generate every dollar of that spending. Stack those two assumptions together, and of course the number balloons enormously. But both assumptions quietly fall apart the moment you look at your actual life. Because in reality, a huge chunk of your retirement income does not come from savings. For a typical earner, Social Security replaces around 40% of pre-retirement pay. 40% arriving every month for the rest of your life before you touch savings. And in reality, your expenses drop sharply the day you stop working. You stop saving for retirement, so that entire chunk of spending simply disappears. You stop paying payroll taxes, work costs, and often the mortgage is finally gone. So the income you actually need to replace is far smaller than your old paycheck. Imagine being handed a grocery bill that included items you never put in your cart. You would not just pay it. You would point out everything that was not yours. The scary retirement number is exactly that padded bill, and nobody taught you to check it. So we are going to audit it together, line by line, and remove what is not yours. Put those two truths together, and the giant number quietly collapses toward half. So let us keep it fair and specific. Here is exactly what the data shows. Think of the scary number like a restaurant menu with no prices, only a scary total. It tells you the bill is enormous, but never shows you what you are actually paying for. Once you itemize it honestly, half the charges turn out not to apply to you at all. The headline is the intimidating total. Your real number is the honest itemized bill. To see this clearly, let us follow Bianca against a coworker. Meet Heather. Bianca and Heather are the same age, same job, same $60,000 salary. Both saw the same terrifying headline, "You need $1.46 million to retire." Heather believed it completely and set out to save the entire $1.5 million. She resigned herself to working deep into her 70s to have any hope of it. Bianca did something different. She refused to trust the headline before checking her own math. She asked one simple question: how much do I actually need for my actual life? And the moment she ran her own numbers, the terrifying target shrank dramatically. Same salary, same headline, same starting point. Only their response was different. Heather trusted the generic number. Bianca trusted her own specific situation. Meet their coworker Curtis, who assumes retirement is simply impossible for people like him. Curtis stopped saving entirely, convinced the giant number could never be reached anyway. But the scary number did not just frighten Curtis, it quietly talked him out of trying. That is the hidden damage of an inflated number. It paralyzes the very people it should help. We will walk through the exact moves Bianca used, in the order she used them. Each one chips a little more off the scary headline until only your real number remains. And by the end, you will be able to run this exact calculation for yourself tonight. So let us open Bianca's real math and watch the giant number quietly cut in half. Heather and Bianca will prove that the number was never really the problem. The problem was believing a stranger's number instead of running your own. Two of them let the headline decide their fate. One decided to do the math. And doing the math, it turns out, was the entire difference between them. Because your real number is personal, and it is almost always far friendlier than the headline. Before running her numbers, Bianca did the one thing Heather kept avoiding. She sat down with a financial advisor to pressure test the scary headline against her life. Within minutes, he crossed out assumption after assumption that simply did not fit her. Bianca watched her impossible number quietly become an achievable one, right in front of her. The headline was built for a stranger. Her real plan was built for her. Move 1 is the single biggest correction the headline leaves out. Social Security. The scary number assumes your savings must fund 100% of your income. But for a typical earner, Social Security already covers around 40% of it. The average retired worker receives close to $2,000 every single month. For a couple, two benefits together can easily reach $3,000 a month or more. That is roughly $30,000 a year, arriving before you touch your savings. So your savings do not have to fund your whole retirement. Only the part left over. Subtract that guaranteed income first, and your target instantly shrinks. The headline treats you as if this monthly income simply did not exist. Every worker gets an official statement estimating exactly what they will receive. Most people have never once opened it, and so they plan in total darkness. Bianca looked hers up in 5 minutes and instantly knew her real starting point. That single number transforms a terrifying guess into a solvable subtraction problem. But it does exist, it is already yours, and it does enormous heavy lifting for you. Think of Social Security like a lifelong roommate who always pays their share of rent. You would never budget to cover the entire rent alone if a roommate always paid half. Yet that is exactly what the headline number quietly tells you to do. It makes you save as if you have no lifelong income at all. But you do. The lower your income, the more of it Social Security replaces, which surprises people. For many modest earners, that single check does most of the heavy lifting. Ignore it, and you scare yourself into saving for a bill you will never fully pay. Move 2 is the second thing the headline gets badly wrong. Your expenses fall. The 80% rule assumes you keep spending almost like you did while working, but a huge slice of your paycheck was never really lifestyle at all. Start with retirement saving itself. Maybe 15% of your pay just stops. Think about that for a moment. A big chunk of your paycheck was going to future you. Once you become that future person, you no longer need to keep feeding the jar. So that entire slice of your old budget simply switches off permanently. You do not need to save for retirement once you are actually in retirement. Next, payroll taxes. Nearly 8% of your pay simply disappears too. Then the daily costs of working, commuting, parking, lunches, and a work wardrobe. For many people, the mortgage is finally paid off right around retirement too. Add those up, and the income you must replace can fall well below the scary rule. Many comfortable retirees actually live well on closer to 60% of their old pay. You are never spending your whole paycheck on your life. Much of it funded your job. This is the part that genuinely shocks people when they finally add it up. A job is not free. It quietly costs you thousands of dollars every single year to hold. Commuting, meals out, professional clothes, and the endless small conveniences of being busy. All of that spending exists only because you are working, and it ends when you stop. So retirement does not just replace your income. It also erases a big slice of your costs. That double effect is exactly what the 80% rule quietly glosses over. Remove the cost of working, and the number you truly need drops again. Move 3 combines both truths into one simple formula for your actual number. Start with your real yearly spending in retirement, not your old gross salary. Then subtract the yearly income Social Security will reliably provide you. Whatever gap remains is the only part your savings actually have to cover. Now multiply that gap by 25, using the classic 4% guideline. The whole formula fits on the back of a napkin, and anyone can run it. There is no complex software, no jargon, and no gatekeeper standing in your way. Just your real spending, your Social Security, and a single multiplication. That result, not the headline, is your true personal retirement number. Notice how different this is from blindly multiplying your whole income by 25. The naive method funds income you already have, so it double counts and inflates. Your savings have one job in retirement, and it is only to top off the gap. Ask them to do more than that, and you are simply oversaving out of fear. The real formula only funds the gap, which is exactly what your savings are for. Let us be clear about why the naive method is so badly misleading. Multiplying your whole income by 25 pretends Social Security does not exist. It asks your savings to recreate income you are already guaranteed to receive. That is like buying a second car when a perfectly good one already sits in your driveway. The gap formula simply stops you from paying twice for the very same income. This one correction is where most of the giant number quietly disappears. Let us run Bianca's actual numbers so you can see the halving happen live. Bianca decides she wants $60,000 a year to live comfortably in retirement. The naive headline math multiplies that by 25, demanding $1.5 million. But Bianca and her partner will receive about $30,000 a year from Social Security. So her savings only need to cover the remaining $30,000 a year. 30,000 times 25 is a target of just $750,000. $750,000, not $1.5 million, almost exactly half. And if Bianca can live on $50,000 instead, her number falls even further. 50,000 minus 30,000 is 20,000. Times 25 is 500,000. 500,000 is a target millions of ordinary savers can genuinely reach. The same headline that screamed impossible now points at a very possible number. The same comfortable life, funded by a fraction of the number that terrified her. Let us pause on how enormous that difference of $750,000 really is. At Bianca's savings pace, that gap alone was worth well over a decade of extra work. So this correction did not just change a spreadsheet, it gave her a decade of life. That is what a single honest number can do when it replaces a scary guess. Bianca did not shrink her dreams. She simply subtracted the income she already had. Let us watch the two women's targets side by side because the contrast is stark. Heather is saving toward a mountain that is twice as tall as it needs to be. Bianca is climbing a hill half the size, and she can already see the top. Same salary, same lifestyle goal, same Social Security, only the math was different. Heather will reach the top eventually, but years later and utterly exhausted. Bianca reached hers years earlier, with energy left to actually enjoy the view. Run your own numbers this way and watch your terrifying target lose half its size. Move 5 makes the number friendlier still. Spending naturally falls as you age. Retirement is not one long, flat, identical stretch of spending every single year. Researchers describe 3 distinct phases, often called go-go, slow-go, and no-go. Early on, in the go-go years, you travel, dine out, and spend on adventures. Then, in the slow-go years, you naturally settle down and spend noticeably less. Finally, in the no-go years, spending on activity drops to its lowest point of all. A flat model assumes you spend at your peak level for 30 straight years. But real spending curves gently downward, so a flat model quietly overshoots. Which means the number you actually need is often smaller than even the gap formula suggests. Bianca planned to spend more early while she was healthy and less as she slowed down. This does not mean planning to be poor later. Health costs can rise near the end. But rising medical costs rarely replace all the travel and activity you gave up. So on the whole, total real spending still drifts gently downward over the decades. Bianca budgeted honestly for each phase instead of one scary flat number for all of them. Matching your money to your real life is how a smaller number becomes plenty. So the scary flat number over-prepares you for years you will barely spend in. Move 6 is the safety net that lets a smaller pot last with total confidence. The 4% rule was built to survive even the worst market history ever recorded. The rule was tested against the Great Depression and every crash since then. It was designed to survive the worst-case retiree, not the average one. So for a typical retiree in a typical era, it is actually quite conservative. It already assumes terrible timing, so it is deliberately cautious by design. On top of that, real retirees are flexible. They adjust spending when markets dip. Trim a little in bad years, spend a little more in good ones. Simple guardrails. That flexibility alone lets a smaller portfolio safely support the same lifestyle. You do not need a giant, rigid fortress of money to feel genuinely secure. A giant, rigid pile of money feels safe, but it quietly costs you years of freedom. Every extra dollar you demand before retiring is more time chained to a desk. A right-sized pot plus flexibility buys you those years back instead. So the goal is not the biggest possible number. It is the correct one for your life. You need a right-sized pot and the willingness to steer gently when needed. Bianca even opened a simple account to hold one flexible year of spending in cash. That small cushion meant she never had to sell investments in a scary down year. A little cash and a little flexibility replaced the need for a giant safety pile. This is how ordinary retirees make a right-sized number feel completely secure. Bianca built exactly that, and her half-sized number turned out to be more than enough. Now here's the twist that reframes this entire scary number industry. The 1.46 million number is not exactly a lie, it is just not about you. It is an average of anxious guesses, inflated by fear and generic assumptions. It assumes no plan, no adjustments, and that savings must carry the entire load. In other words, it is the number for someone who does none of what you just learned. But here's the real quiet danger of that inflated headline number. For every person it scares into oversaving, it scares another into giving up entirely. Curtis gave up because a false number told him the goal was hopeless. Heather overworked for years, chasing a target that was twice what she truly needed. It is worth asking why these giant numbers get published in the first place. A frightening number grabs attention, sells products, and drives anxious clicks. A calm, personalized number does none of those things, so it rarely makes headlines. So the loudest numbers you hear are the ones designed to unsettle you the most. That does not make them useful, it only makes them loud. Both were quietly harmed by the very same misleading headline number. Bianca, meanwhile, simply calculated her own truth and retired years earlier. She did not need twice the money. She needed half the fear and a little real math. The most expensive number in retirement is a scary one you never bothered to check. There is a quiet cruelty in a number that makes savers feel like failures. People who did everything right still felt hopelessly behind against a phantom target. Removing that phantom does not lower your standards. It reveals your real progress. Bianca was never behind. She was measured against a number that was never hers. Here is the line worth remembering. Your number is personal, and it is smaller than they say. None of this means you should stop saving or take retirement lightly. Saving hard is still wise, and a cushion still brings real peace of mind. The point is simply to aim at the right target instead of a terrifying phantom. Diligence pointed at the correct number is what actually buys your freedom. The headline sells anxiety. Your own math sells you a calm, reachable finish line. A generic number describes a crowd. Your number describes your actual specific life. Only one of those two numbers can ever set a real date on your freedom. So stop absorbing the generic number. Start calculating the one that is actually yours. Notice how quietly the whole feeling shifts from panic into genuine possibility. The scary number never changed. What changed was Bianca finally understanding it. Understanding turned a wall into a door she could simply walk right through. And that door was open the entire time, hidden only behind a frightening headline. Do that, and comfortable retirement stops being a fantasy and becomes a plan. So let us turn all of this into a simple calculation you can run this very week. First, estimate your real yearly spending in retirement, not your current gross salary. The easiest way is to track your real spending for a single, honest month. Then simply remove the costs that will disappear once you finally stop working. Be honest and remember that work costs, saving, and often a mortgage all disappear. Second, look up your estimated Social Security benefit on the official statement. Third, subtract that benefit from your spending to find the gap your savings must fill. Fourth, multiply that gap by 25. That, not the headline, is your real number. Write that final number down and keep it somewhere you will actually see it. Let it quietly replace the scary headline as the only number that guides you. If the gap comes out even smaller because you spend modestly, your number shrinks more. And if you want a richer lifestyle, you simply aim a little higher on purpose. The point is that the number is finally yours to see, adjust, and actually reach. For a huge number of people, that figure lands right around half the scary headline. Bianca ran this exact calculation and pulled her retirement in by nearly a decade. Picture Bianca a few years from now, on a weekday morning with nowhere to be. Comfortable, it turns out, was never about a giant number. It was about enough. And enough, for most people, is roughly half of what the headlines scream. She is not living lavishly, but she is genuinely comfortable and completely free. Meanwhile, on that same morning, Heather is still commuting to chase a phantom target. Same salary, same era, same opportunity. One simply refused to run the honest math. She is not retiring on scraps. She is retiring comfortably on a realistic, honest number. Curtis, once he saw Bianca's math, started saving again with real hope. A reachable number gave him a reason to try that a hopeless one never could. That is the real gift of an honest number. It makes the effort feel worth it again. None of this required earning more, winning a jackpot, or living on nothing. This entire calculation takes about 15 minutes and a single honest afternoon. 15 minutes, in exchange for possibly years of your working life back. There may be no higher paid quarter hour you will ever spend on your own future. So do not let another year pass believing a number you have never once checked. It only required checking the scary number against the reality of your own life. Make the decision that matches your reality, not someone else's sales pitch. If this made retirement feel reachable again, subscribe to Robert Money Logic. Hit the notification bell so the next breakdown reaches you at exactly the right moment. We break down the hidden math behind the financial decisions you face every single day. Your comfortable retirement is not a fantasy reserved for millionaires alone. It is a math problem you can absolutely solve, starting with your very next paycheck. Bianca proved that a comfortable retirement was never as far away as they claimed. It was hidden behind a number that was never actually built for her life. The same is almost certainly true for you once you do the honest arithmetic. The experts gave you a number designed to scare you into working forever. You have permission to ignore the scary headline and trust your own honest math. Because no expert on television knows your spending, your benefits, or your life. Only you can build the number that actually fits the retirement you want. Share this with someone who has quietly given up on retirement out of fear. A 5-minute calculation might hand them back years of their life. The math is not scary once you finally do it for yourself, honestly and specifically. So run your own math, find your real number, and retire on a fraction of the fear.